Year 8, so moving on, we've started looking at a genre, we've done horror, we're moving on now to action and adventure writing. And focus for today's lesson is being able to identify and use action verbs in your writing. A reminder, verbs, doing words, so we've got examples, sleep, run, cook and drive, things that we're actually doing, okay? So we're going to look at a piece of writing in a minute and read it through, look at the action verbs that have been used in it. So we're looking at the extract called The Attack from Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Very famous book, you might have heard of it. And let's have a read through then, and this is about a pirate attack. Suddenly, a little cloud of pirates leapt from the woods in the north side and ran straight on the stockade. At the same moment, the fire was once more opened from the woods and the rifle ball sang through the doorway and knocked the doctor's musket into bits. The boarders swarmed over the fence like monkeys. Squire and Grey fired again and yet again. 3 men fell, 1 forwards into the enclosure, 2 back on the outside. But of these, 1 was evidently more frightened than hurt, for he was on his feet again in a crack and instantly disappeared among the trees. 2 had bit the dust, 1 had fled, 4 had made good their footing inside our defences, while from the shelter of the woods 7 or 8 men, each evidently supplied with several muskets, kept up a hot though useless fire on the log house. The 4 who had boarded made straight before them for the building, shouting as they ran, and the men among the trees shouted back to encourage them. In a moment the 4 pirates had swarmed up the mound and were upon us. So what I'd like you to do, as you can see in the first paragraph, we've got words like leapt, opened, knocked, sang. They're all verbs and they're all action verbs. They're where things are actually happening. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video on this piece of writing and write down any action verbs that you've managed to identify from this piece of writing. Okay, off you go. Okay, so the action verbs that you should have found from that piece of writing. The first few had already been done for you, so we've got leapt, ran, opened, sang and knocked. And then in the other 3 paragraphs we've got swarmed, fired, fell, disappeared, bit, fled, boarded, shouting, ran, shouted and swarmed again. Okay, so lots of action going on in there. So the activity we're going to have a go at doing now is we're going to be putting together a piece of writing describing a robbery at a jewellery store. And obviously if you've ever seen any action films, anything like that, there's going to be loads and loads of action. So the first thing we're going to need to do, as we've got here, is to make a list of any verbs that you can think of that show a sense of action, pace, sound or movement. And we've got a few on here, some of them that we've already used this morning. Rang, buzzed, exploded, screamed, kicked, reached, watched. Think about any other verbs that you might need to use when putting together a piece of writing about a robbery at the jeweller's. Think about all the different things that are going to be happening when the robbers arrive. They're not just going to walk up to the jewellery store and walk in. Do they arrive in a car? So is it going to screech to a halt? Are they going to slam the brakes on? So 5 minutes now to put together a list of verbs that you might use when describing a robbery at a jeweller's. So hopefully you've put together your list of verbs that you would use in a piece of writing about a robbery at a jeweller's. What we've got on the board now are the features of writing in the action genre. So we need to copy these down. So we need to make sure you're using a range of sentence lengths and styles. Use punctuation for effect. So we've got, for example, exclamation marks. If anything is shocking or surprising or unexpected, then that sentence should have an exclamation mark at the end of it. Obviously, we want lots of action verbs in here. That's what the focus is. Say what happens. We need to be able to imagine this in our minds. Say also what's heard. So think about using your senses. Don't just think about what you can see while this robbery is going on. What can you hear? Can you hear gunshots? Can you hear car tyres screeching to a halt? Can you hear people screaming? Try to add in all that detail. And we can also show physical reaction of the characters. So we've got an example here. Joe fell backwards, landing on a pile of smashed glass. So again, we can picture that as it's happening. Okay, so the next thing to do is copy down those features of writing in the action genre into your books or paper or wherever you're working. Okay, so we're going to now put together a piece of writing called Robbery at the Jeweller's. You've got on here the 4 paragraphs that you're going to be using. So paragraph 1, what were you doing at the beginning? It needs to start off quite calmly, and we'll look at an example in a minute. So were you out shopping with one of your friends? Were you just off to go and get a McDonald's? Were you going actually into the jeweller's to buy a present for somebody? So think about what you were doing, who you were with, where you were, and then what did you see at the start of the robbery? This is when the action is going to start taking place. Did you notice that it was happening because you heard glass smashing? Did he hear screaming? Were there car tyres screeching to a halt? Think about how this robbery has actually begun. How did the robbery continue? Well, that's going to depend on where you are, because you're going to be a witness to this. So are you actually in the jeweller's? Are you watching it all happen really close up? Were you over the other side of the road, watching it happen, hearing things and wondering actually what's going on inside? Or can you see through the window of what's going on inside? So think about, from your perspective, wherever you're witnessing this, how the robbery continues. And then your final paragraph, paragraph 4, think about how this robbery ends. Do the police arrive? Has somebody managed to phone 999 and the police arrive and they come and arrest the robbers? Do the robbers get away? Do they take hostages? What goes on at the end of this? And as it says at the bottom, remember to include lots of action verbs to make your writing as exciting as possible. If we just have a look at an example starter. So this one starts off really calm, and then we'll see where it moves into the action. So, thank you. I smiled sweetly at the jeweller as he held out the 22-carat diamond ring. I'd saved so long and hard for this ring. Nothing was going to stop me now as I slipped it on my finger. Suddenly, and without warning, a scream rang out as 2 quick, harsh gunshots echoed in the silence. I ducked. Glass splintered in all directions, skimming over the heads of people as they tried to get out of the way. In the same second that the shots changed our lives forever, 2 masked men burst through the now open window, screaming, get down, else you'll die." So we can see where we've got that word suddenly. That's where the action starts coming in. It was all calm until then, and then that word indicates the move to the action. So I'm going to give you about 20 minutes now to have a go at writing your own piece of action writing. You're writing about a robbery at the jeweller's. Okay, off you go.